Okay, how many people here are planning on being team leaders? Okay, and the rest are marketing people, I'm guessing. This is the beginning of a subject that has been the bane of my existence as a team leader for many years. And I was fortunate enough to have a good mentor to teach me a lot of things. And this is based on the course that I'm doing here. First of all, let's talk a little bit about some of the questions that a lot of team leaders might have. Why can't I convince my team to do X, such as TDD? Why do we keep putting up fires, and how do I get over that? Questions that are even more personal. As a team leader, how do I manage not to lose my friends as I become their manager? And of course, all these questions haunted me for quite a bit. And I've been managing teams for, I think, 6.5 years now. Actually, right now, I'm not a team leader anymore. I started an internship at a Ruby place, so I'm a team member. So I get to experience all the anti-patterns that you're going to hear about firsthand. All the things I'm going to talk about are covered much more widely with a lot of exercises. With a lot more exercises and drills and workshops at the course, a 2-day course that I'm doing. So there's going to be a new one in November, so feel free to go there and register before I finish my talk. I'm also starting to write a book called Notes to a Software Team Leader, which is the things that any team leader in software needs to know when they get into this role. And a lot of them are not easy to hear. We're actually just going to jump right in, and we're going to start with the first mistake that most team leaders fail to do. That is to not recognize the maturity of a specific team. So, I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of agile projects out there. How many people here are doing something in the realm of agile? Okay, how many people are doing Scrum, for example? Okay. How many people think Scrum doesn't fit the current team? Okay, how many people are afraid to raise their hands because their leader is here? That's another question. Sometimes Scrum and Agile seem like they don't fit the team that you're currently in. You read the books and you see all the conferences, and you hear about these self-organizing teams. These legendary beasts that seem to exist in very, very few places, kind of like unicorns. Self-organizing is not something you just throw on a team. Okay, let's take a bunch of developers, put them in a room, and let them have it, because a lot of developers aren't ready to take on such a thing. They're not ready to be self-organizing. They don't have skills to do it. So I've observed 3 basic team levels, and based on each one of those, the leadership type needs to change. And Scrum and Agile, when they talk about self-organizing or self-leading teams, they talk about teams at the last stage. But most team leaders and most organizations really don't recognize that most teams are actually on the first or second stage, usually the first. So let me explain a little bit of what that means. Most teams are in a chaotic state. Now, it sounds awesome, but there is a very, very simple definition. The way I define chaos is when the team doesn't have any time to learn. Okay? If your team is constantly putting out fires, and they don't have time to learn, that's chaos. If your team is not putting out fires, but they're constantly changing or constantly chasing a schedule that will never end, because they always miss it, so they never have time to learn, that's chaos. And the reason I call it chaos is because no matter what the situation of the team at that time, it will stay that way until someone takes the team out of chaos. A team in chaos doesn't have time to learn and needs a leader that's very different from a leader in a self-leading team. A lot of people equate it to the Titanic. So the phrase goes, when the ship is sinking, the captain gives orders. They don't call a meeting. And that's precisely the situation where we are in chaos. So the purpose of a team leader in chaos mode is to get the team out of chaos. It's not to teach the team. It's not to grow the team. It's not to let them self-organize. It's to actually get the team to a place where they can start learning, where they have time to learn. So to get out of chaos, there are several things that a team leader can do. For example, they can remove some of the current commitments of the team. They can start visualizing the work so they have some kind of negotiation going with management. But I think the biggest thing that happens in chaos is that the team leader needs to take a stand. And that's one of the most frightening things ever for a team lead. So most team leaders in chaos will actually feel the most comfortable staying that way, not doing anything about it. That's actually the least risky thing you can do as a team leader, is to not do anything about the state of the team. You just continue working as if everything is great. I mean, everyone will continue to just complain about how we never have time to do anything. We will continue to miss schedules. We'll continue to have continuous fires. And as a team lead, you don't need to take a stand there. You can just continue on. That's your comfort zone. Most team leads are afraid of taking the team out of this because that requires them for risk. It requires them to take a stand in front of management. It requires them to take a personal risk. And someone smart once said, I think it was Gerald Weinberg, management done right is a really tough job. Okay, that's why managers get paid more. But most managers like to get paid more and not do the tough work. What is the tough work? We'll cover a lot of this, but some of the tough work is about taking a stand, is about choosing what's right for the team, and actually about delivering that inside the organization. The next stage is the learning stage. That's the stage that happens when you have some learning time. At that stage, leadership changes again. And the team leader becomes more of a coach, although they continue to be a leader on things that the team cannot afford to get messed up. That's the stage where you will question and grow and challenge people. And your main job as a team lead during the learning stage is not to get the team out of learning stage, is to actually get the team as better as possible each week than they were the week before. To get them to a self-leading stage, you need to teach them how not to need you as a team leader. So you will teach them self-organization by challenging them, by delegation, and by basically sometimes giving them homework. Homework is a kind of a personal thing, commitment-based personal thing that we'll talk about, but it involves the idea that every week and every month you ask yourself, is every one of the people in my team better this week or this month than they were the week before? And if the answer to that is not true, then something is missing in the type of leadership that you're doing. Most team leaders don't do this. They don't focus on growing people. They focus on just getting the team to do their specific tasks. That's why most teams actually stay in chaos. Because once you make time for the learning and you use it, you get a team that is much more open to new ideas, that is not afraid of trying new things. Managers are usually afraid of challenging people underneath them, and for a lot of reasons we'll talk about. And the third stage is self-leading. That's the stage where usually the team leader is no longer a team lead for the team. They're more of a mentor or a coach. They remain influenced on the team, but not by telling people what to do, but by changing the constraints around the team. This is the stage where most people talk about when they talk about Scrum and the fact that the Scrum Master only is in charge of the process and the constraints, but he cannot tell people what to do. Most teams are nowhere near that stage. They do not know how to solve their own problems. Okay? So, as an example, in the learning stage, When you want to teach people to solve their own problems, as a team leader, you get a lot of things handed to you to solve. Does anyone have anything that they get faced with, like a team member comes to you and says, I have a problem. Can you help me solve this problem? What kind of problems do you hear from your team members? Anyone? Technical problems. I don't know how to solve this, right? What other problems do team members have? Sorry? Yes? One of you? Knowledge management. So, okay. So I need to find out how to do this. Please solve it for me. A lot of things that you're expected to solve. How about my machine is too slow? Has anyone ever heard this? Okay. What do you do if someone comes to you and says my machine is too slow? Anyone? You get him a better machine, right? That's the job of the team leader, right? No. In the learning stage, if you do that, then you are perpetuating two situations. One, you've perpetuated a situation where that person will continue to come to you every time they have a problem with the machine. Well, what's wrong with that, you may ask? Isn't that your job? No, your job is to get that person to not need you. When they don't need you, they can be self-organizing. So what do you do? Sorry? Send him to IT support. Okay. What do you tell them? Fix your own problem? Within constraints, okay. So you find a way for them to solve their own problems, right? And there's a sentence that goes along with that. And it's going to be really hard to say that to a person when they come to you with a computer that's very slow. You're going to ask him, what are you going to do about it? Now, when you first hear that sentence, when my team leader first told me that sentence, I came to him and said, that guy on the team, I don't really work well with him. He said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, what do you mean, what am I? Aren't you the team leader? You want me to do your job? And of course, he said, if you don't know how to solve your own problems, then why am I here? I'm not here to solve your problems. I'm here to teach you how to solve your problems. And this is really hard for people to grasp, especially because it sounds really condescending. And it sounds annoying. And it sounds like it's the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Here you are giving that person more work than they already have, instead of helping them. And I used to think that the role of a team leader is to just get the team working, get out of the way. And that's true in chaos mode. In learning mode, if you do that, you will forever be the bottleneck of the team. Every problem, every little thing, you will be the person they go to. Again, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that you're focusing on the wrong things. If you keep solving their problems, not only are they not learning, but you don't have any time. So in the learning stage, and in chaos, and in all stages really, you should all spend at least 50% of your time with the team. But most team leaders don't have that kind of time. They're hung up in meetings, and they're hung up in all the things that they're solving for their team members. By freeing up that time, you make yourself time to be with the team and coaching them and teaching them more things. But that's a really tough thing to do. Because again, you have to get out of your comfort zone and tell someone who you're friends with, what are you going to do about it? Which means that the second biggest problem is fear of delegation. Most team leaders are afraid to delegate. They like controlling things, and it's a nice, fun feeling. But again, fear of delegation is one of the main causes why teams stay the way they are. And by getting people out of their own comfort zone, you can actually expose them to new and exciting things that they never knew about themselves. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you feel comfortable in what you're doing right now, then you're doing something wrong. If all your team members feel comfortable in what they're doing right now, you're doing something wrong. What they're supposed to be feeling is fear. Not from you, but from what's going to happen when they do that thing that they've never done before. They're supposed to feel a bit of an anxiety. They're supposed to feel a little bit of unknown, because that's how you learn things. You don't learn things by doing the things you've always done. You learn things by doing something you've never done before. And in learning, you always have those ups and downs. When you learn a new programming language, at the beginning, it's difficult and it's very, very frustrating. Then you become better and better until you feel comfortable again. And it's the same thing with every little thing that you learn. It's about exposing yourself out of the comfort zone and doing something you've never done before. Now, personally, as a team leader, it's the same thing. By actually delegating to people, this is that team leader getting out of their own comfort zone. And that's a tough thing to do. And this is the question that I try to ask at least once a day when I'm a team lead. So here's a homework that you can actually take home to work with you. See if you can ask that question at least once in the next 3 days. See what happens. After you do that, see if you can ask it once every day, etc., etc. Now you can get the feeling from that person where they might get annoyed, and that's okay. Because people get annoyed when they're out of their comfort zone. But that's your job. That's why you get paid more. Because it's tough. It feels weird because a lot of people fear engagement. They fear talking to people about things that matter. Because no one wants to ruffle the feathers of anyone else. Programming seems to be that, well, people like to believe it's a very happy, idealistic place where everyone does what they want and love. But engaging people in real problems is one of the jobs of a team leader. What do people do to avoid engagement? Well, it's a very, very broad topic. But to avoid talking to a person, a team leader can do a lot of things. Placating. Placating in this sense means that you actually abolish yourself from the conversation. So have you ever seen, I don't know, have you ever seen that situation where you have a programmer who is the only one who knows that specific subject on the project? So if that programmer ever leaves, the project is doomed. So no manager can ever tell that person what to do. Do you think you can do this? No. Okay. That's placating. That's canceling the things that you actually feel that need to be done in fear of the other. Now, there are ways to fight this. One of the ways to fight this is to create options where you don't have only one person. That's called the bus factor of one, by the way. A bus factor is how many people need to get hit by a bus for the project to get shut down. Okay? A bus factor of one, you get a lot of placating on that person. You get two people with the same knowledge, you got options. You can actually start demanding things from that person now. How do you get that? Pair programming is one of the ways. Changing the responsibilities, getting that person in charge of other people who need to do the same work. But placating is a very good way to avoid having a really tough conversation about what that person is doing or not doing. Another way to avoid conversations is being irrelevant as managers. Being irrelevant means that when your team needs you, you're not there. That when you need to do something for the team, you are not there. For example, you're so tied up in phone calls and meetings that you don't do the hard things that you know that you need to do. For example, talking to people about problems. This is all done usually subconsciously, but a lot of managers find somehow that they're so swamped with work that they maybe have a half hour each day to actually spend watching the faces of people on their team. But as a priority, you need to have at least 50% of your time with the team to coach, to teach, and to know actually what's going on. You can choose to have 50% of your time. one of the people that I taught is actually the owner of that company. And he said, I can't spend 50% of my time with the members of the team. But he mentioned that he has a problem of quality with the code. I said, if you want to improve quality, spend time with people and teach them about quality. But he doesn't have that time. Why? Because he's in meetings. Well, what happens if you cancel those meetings? I don't know. But that guy is the owner. If he doesn't know, who will know? So a lot of times you do have the power to change exactly what you need to do. But that will force you into tough conversations about what people do and don't do. And you actually talk one-on-one with someone is one of the hardest things that you have to do as a team leader. Here's another technique. It's called being reasonable. I don't know if you know this, but people are not reasonable creatures. So what's being super reasonable is assuming that people know exactly what you want and exactly what's in your head after, for example, saying it once. So here's an example of being super reasonable. The team leader announces a new project. He gets up in front of the team, shows the vision for the project, explains what's going to happen, what it looks like, and that's the last time they hear about the project vision, what it's supposed to look like for the next 8 months. That's being reasonable to say that they remember everything that we talked about for 8 months, and that they don't need to be reminded of the values that we have in the project. Super reasonable is about sending an email that says a few words that in your head are a book. But in the email, there are a couple of sentences. So, and then assuming that the person who receives the email reads the whole book in your head and understands exactly what you understood. But people like to think that reasonably that person will understand because then they don't have to go and actually talk to that person. And of course, the common one, blaming. It's nice to blame someone for various things. You can blame someone for malice. Why is he doing that? Why is he leaving in the middle of a project? He's doing this to me on purpose. That's also called the paranoid model. But seriously, how many of you have ever thought that about someone on the project? That they're doing something to the project on purpose? Has anyone ever thought that? Be honest. Okay. Now, it's really easy to think that. It's also easy to think he's just a lazy bastard. But by putting words or definitions, presuppositions on that person, we make ourselves more comfortable in not needing to talk to that person because we already have a frame of what he's like in our head. We don't need to hear about the context that that person actually has. So we just listen to ourselves. That other person doesn't exist. We don't need to talk to them because we already know what they're going to say. Has anyone ever said that to someone? I don't need to talk to him. I know exactly what he's going to say when I'm going to say this sentence. Has that ever happened to you? How about in marriage? Has that ever happened to you? I talk to him and I explain. He just can't seem to learn this stuff, assuming that that person cannot learn. Now, it's very, very subtle, but the words are there. And by putting the context that says that you have some kind of understanding of why that person is doing what they're doing, you prevent the need to talk to the person. And it's all about being afraid of engaging another person in a real conversation that might actually involve some conflict. I had a team member once that was really a slow typist. So it was really difficult to work with that person. Whenever you paired with him, you had to wait a long time. So a lot of people didn't want to work with that person because it was really slow. So I went to my manager at that time and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what to do. Because these are the cards I've been dealt. That's what I have. I'm stuck. And he said, well, why don't you try talking to him and telling him some of the stuff you told me, that you think he could be faster as a typist and all that stuff. And I looked at him, and I basically said, no. I'm not going to talk to him about that. That's crazy, because he's my friend. And if I talk to him about it, he will want to leave, and he will not want to be my friend anymore. It's not fair to him and, of course, to me. But my mentor urged me to have that talk in a reasonable way and to explain that person in terms of benefits, the things that he could gain from being a faster typist. He explained to me that that person might not even be aware of that problem. So the context of that person, in my head, was that he already knows, and that he doesn't care about it, or that he's not able to do it. And that was a very wrong thing to do, because when I actually got up the nerve to talk to that person, and that was one of the hardest days that I've ever had as a team leader, I remember my heart was beating so fast, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't run a lot, so I'm not in good shape. And as I was going to talk to that person, we sat down to the table, and I wasn't sure what my first sentence is going to be. So I just asked, so how are you doing? How are things going? He said, well, pretty much okay. And I expected him to say something about being a slow typist. I expected him to say, I don't know, I try to type faster, but I can't. So I was pleasantly surprised, because I had built this whole story in my head. And then after I realized that there is no personal problem that's preventing him from working, he said, I don't know if you noticed this, but you are a slow typist. Did you know that I think you can do even like 4 times faster than you can type right now? And he said, oh, really? That's awesome. Yeah, how do I do that? And so I realized that that people really do expect to get better, but they're not aware. And that tough conversation usually is just an opening for a learning experience. And if you phrase it the right way, people will want to get better. So for example, we started on a drilling program in which I gave him the software that I use to learn to touch type. And on a weekly basis, I basically gave him homework to learn to touch type. And every week we would use the same article to measure how many words per minute he can type, just so we can see the progress. Not because he's going to get it fired if it's not going to work. That was personal homework. It has nothing to do with work. It was just him getting better at what he does. And it took a few months, but that person got much better and got workable. And that was a very tough conversation, but it was one of the best lessons that I've ever learned. By stepping out of my comfort zone and actually talking to that person, I got him out of his comfort zone, and we both had a really big learning experience, that it's okay to engage with other people, and it's okay to not just always assume that everything is so friendly and perfect. Someone raise their hand? No, because he didn't come to me with the problem. Okay? He wasn't aware of the problem. It would be weird if I came to him and said, you're a slow typist. What are you going to do about it? However, it's not impossible for me to say that to someone, assuming that I've already had learning experiences with that person, because that's a very terse way to accomplish that. And people will get annoyed anyway when you say, what are you going to do about it? It's already getting them out of the comfort zone. So coupling that with something that they have to get better at anyway, I think it was too much. Anyway, it was effective, the way I did it then. But when people come to me with a problem, they have the motivation to solve it. All I need to do is to enable them to solve it. Okay? So we ended that meeting with him committing to actually doing that homework and being a much happier developer at the company. And I will always be indebted to my mentor and manager at the time for getting me out of my comfort zone as scary as that was. So people who get challenged, step out of their comfort zone and learn something on the job will be much more loyal employees. They will appreciate you much more when you actually challenge them to do something. And that's a big lesson that I've learned. Because I know, because I personally feel that. Another big mistake that people do, especially team leaders, is that when they see a behavior in the wild, they don't understand the context or the forces that act around that person to generate that behavior. So there's a book called Influencer, The Power to Change Anything. And in that book, there is a really interesting sentence. And it says, for any behavior you see in the wild, the world is perfectly designed for that behavior to happen. So if you see someone, one of the things that came up in our course, we had a project manager, one of the people mentioned, they have a project manager who doesn't want to take a look at the Kanban boards. Okay? That's a behavior that we want to change. It doesn't really matter if it's someone who works for us or not. By understanding the forces that act on that person to work this way, we can begin to understand why he's doing it and how to be able to change it later. A person that doesn't want to do test-driven development. How many of you have tried to convince people to do TDD? How many of you have succeeded? Okay, about half. So the reason that it almost never succeeds, and this is of course the UK, so everything is different, is that people have a lot of things going on except just personal motivation. There are three main pillars of forces. There's the personal forces, the motivation, the ability to do something. There's a social motivation and ability to do something, and environmental ability and motivation to do something. Let's talk about TDD for a second. Personal. If you want a person to start doing TDD, but they're not, you actually make a chart, and you say, okay, on the personal level, does that person have motivation to do TDD? Do they believe in it? Do they think it's a good idea? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If they don't, that's something we need to work on. But on a personal level, do they have the ability to do it? Do they know how to do it? Do they know how to do it well? If not, that's a solvable issue, right? Training or anything like that. But if they have the ability but they don't have motivation, they're not going to do it. But what if they did have motivation and ability and they're still not doing it? Well, socially, they might not have the motivation to do it. What's the social motivation? It's how does society around you react when you do that behavior? Maybe everyone else on the team isn't doing TDD anyway. So if they start doing TDD, they will be the odd person out. So that's a big motivation not to do something. Maybe everyone else is doing TDD, but maybe everyone is doing TDD, but the motivation from people they respect, maybe on other teams, is that people they look up to don't do TDD. So I got those mixed up. The ability is how people react around you. Motivation is what people you look up to. So imagine a person on a team doing TDD, but he's not. And you ask them, and he says, well, Charles Petzold doesn't do TDD. So obviously it works, even when you don't do that. What do you do against something like that? Well, one way is to get the people they look up to talk about that behavior in a good way. So if you can find an email for Charles Petzold, or get an article where he writes about TDD, or anything, even the smallest hint of sentence that says that TDD is not a bad thing, and that he actually does it sometimes, you will flip that person like that. I don't know if you've ever had that situation. You fight with your girlfriend about something, and you know that she's wrong. And of course, you're perfectly right. So you argue and you argue and you argue, and then you go to a mutual friend, and that mutual friend agrees with you. And suddenly your girlfriend says, oh, okay. I don't know if that ever happened to you. It happens to me. Sometimes people on the other side of the equation who are not affiliated with anyone of the parties, who they do look up to, which is not you, of course, can make all the difference. But even if everyone at the team does TDD and everyone you respect does TDD and you have personal motivation and the ability to do it, maybe the environment is preventing you from doing it. Maybe you don't have environmental ability to do TDD because you cannot approve a budget for an automated build machine. Maybe you don't have the budget to get the testing tools, or you work on Notepad instead of Visual Studio. So the environment is physically preventing you from doing that thing. And we have the environmental motivation. What are the rewards or punishments of doing or not doing that behavior? Maybe people are rewarded by amounts of lines of code. Maybe they're being rewarded by amounts of tests. Maybe they're just being rewarded by amount of coverage. Those are measures that can actually destroy TDD because people start working for the measures instead of for actually tests that are good. So you have to look at all these 6 forces and understand what happens. And here's the real trick. For any behavior, usually you're going to find more than a single source of influence. And if you only fix some of the sources, you're not going to be able to change the behavior. You have to affect each and every one of the influence forces for that behavior to change. So if they don't have motivation, they don't have social ability, and the environment is preventing them, you have to solve all 3. Sometimes what you end up with is question marks on some of these. Those question marks are the places where you have to engage people and actually ask them things. For example, how do you know their motivation to do or not to do something without talking to them? Questions about the 6 forces? Anyone? How do I define environment motivation? It's the rewards and punishments from the company you work in. What are you being rewarded on? For example, someone didn't want to do pair programming, although everyone else wanted to. And then, I think it's in a book by Mike Cohn about succeeding with Agile. And that person left, and it turns out that that person's department and him were being rewarded on quality of code that they wrote. But if you do pair programming, how do you know which code was written by you? Which now that person doesn't want to do pair programming because of that reason. So the company is actually denying that person from doing a behavior that's good. So if you don't look at all these places, you might end up not understanding why something happens. I find that when I look at something, it helps me. It's like a checklist of thinking, did we think about that? Did we think about that? And I can change and influence a lot of behavior that way. Fear of assertiveness. This, I see this a lot in Norway and in the UK. I don't see it in Denmark. So people are afraid to be assertive with their team. And someone asked me, why is there a difference between Norway and Denmark? Are they like really close to each other? And the reason is that, well, someone said, a sociologist, that Norwegians were ruled by Danish people. So they're used to be ruled, so they don't want to. And Danish people are used to rule, so they're much more open and assertive. I don't know what that says about the UK, though. Fear of assertiveness. That's the fear of hurting people. But when you're in chaos mode, being assertive is one of the things you're going to need to do the most. It's not about shouting. It's about standing your ground. It's about not accepting something that is not acceptable. It's about stopping a behavior because right now the ship is sinking and you just need everyone's focus to do something. It's about seeing 2 people argue and cutting that argument in that second and telling them, for example, you have 30 seconds to find a solution, or I'll find a solution for you. That's a very assertive thing to say. Most people are really afraid to say that. But this is a very good exercise to do, because in chaos mode, you don't have a choice. It's your ass, okay? You either deliver something or you don't. You either put out fires or you don't. But your team is usually not going to be equipped to help you survive that. What you need to do at that point is be the captain of the sinking ship and give orders. And giving orders is by definition assertive. There is no time to learn. There is no time to debate. If you're in the project and the team isn't even using source control, and everyone's like, why are you late for the last 6 months? You start removing some of the technical debt. You start removing some of the commitments to other stakeholders. And you don't debate which source control to use. You don't say, have a meeting and decide without me. You don't say, what do you think? Is it a good idea to use source control? No, that's not what you do in chaos. You say, we will use source control from this moment on. We will use Git. We will use Subversion. Here's what we do from now on. So by tomorrow at this time, I want this Subversion server up. I'll sit with you and we'll do it together. That's what you do. So you make facts happen so that you can continue and actually move on, get the team out of chaos. If you don't, you're going to be in that loop of continuing to be in chaos. That's one of the things that I actually exercise with people on the course, is put them in a situation where they have time pressure and chaos and non-functioning team members. They actually have to tell people what to do. And it's amazing how even in lab experiments of 5-minute iterations, people are still very, very uncomfortable in actually telling someone what to do in a very, very simple and assertive way. How do I prevent assertion from becoming aggression? Some people can see assertion as aggressive behavior. That's true. When you're in chaos mode, that's currently not your concern. You will heal those wounds later. You have to. But right now, the priority is actually getting things out of the way so the team has time to talk about these things. Otherwise, you're going to stay there. Of course, if you do assertive too much, and then you become aggressive, and that's wrong. And it's not about being aggressive, it's about being assertive. I don't have to be aggressive to be assertive. And that's why one of the reasons that I think it's important for people to actually exercise this in a safe environment where people can actually tell them, hold on. There is no need to take out your belt. And another very common mistake is that team leaders spread the idea of not committing to things. So how many times have you heard sentences like this? So we should do this. You know what I wish? I wish that we would have that. So I'm going to try to get this done. Has anyone said that before? I'm going to try to get this done. Okay. So what's the problem with such a sentence? There is a very big problem, especially when you have people who don't follow up on their commitments. And the problem is usually with the language. What we're going to talk about is the language of commitment. Once you start, you hear this for the first time, you see it everywhere. What do you hear when I say, I really need to lose some weight? Am I going to lose weight? Exactly. I'm not. Yeah. By making public commitments, you're more likely to actually do them. Well, I can barely hear you. A public commitment to lose weight to your family and friend is less likely to work. Interesting. Maybe weight is a serious issue. Well, I don't know. I'd love to read that research. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's the way you do the commitment. Maybe it's in the ceremony itself. Here, we don't have a specific ceremony, but we do have wording that's important. What's important is that we don't want to use these words. We want to use these words. That's all we do. When you use words like I will by some time, you actually commit to doing something, and you don't have a way out in that sentence. You don't say I will, and then you don't give an end date, because that could be a year from now. You don't say I could, or you don't say I would. You say I will, because that's actually you saying I will do something, and you will feel less, you will actually feel worse if you don't do it, because you told someone you would, and hopefully to someone you respect. So that's the beginning of commitment. When I say the mistake is helping to spread non-commitment, is that at the very least, team leaders don't mind the words that come out of their own mouth and of their teams. And once you start looking for this, you realize that you say a lot of these things all the time, and things don't get done, and you don't know why. So if you ever ended the meeting by saying, okay, so we should do this. Okay, so we're going to do this. But at the end of the meeting, nobody knows who's going to do this. That's one of the reasons, because you don't have a specific commitment. So you end meetings by saying, okay, so does everybody know what they're going to do? Then, of course, you have that quiet period where no one talks, and you say, okay, so what are you going to do? I don't know. Okay, so what can you commit to from the following? And people say, well, I could do this. And you say, okay. Will you do it? Yes. Okay. So you will do this by when? Well, by Wednesday. I could do it by Wednesday. So will you do it by Wednesday? I will do it by Wednesday. You want to hear those words. It's amazing how much of an impact it has. It doesn't mean it's going to get done, but it means it's more likely that the person will try to follow up on that. What happens when commitments get broken? Well, you expect people to break their commitments sometimes because life is unexpected. So if you have a meeting at a cafe across the street and you find out 10 minutes before the meeting that you're still in traffic, what do? If you don't make the meeting, what do you do? What's the simplest thing you do? You call that person, you say, I'm going to be late. That's the thing that you do with commitments here. But the requirement is that the second you know that you're not going to make it, you raise the flag so that you give the rest of the team the option of helping you finish the commitment. So if someone committed to doing X phone calls or to work on bug X for X amount of hours, and he's not going to do it because he just got a requirement from the CTO to work on something else, he raises the flag, sends an email to the entire team. Says, I'm not going to be able to commit to close on my commitment to work on this. And then everyone can help by adding their own hours or anything else. So raising the flag is an important thing. Another important thing about commitment, you only expect people to commit to things that are under their full control. So let's say that you have a huge bug, and you say, okay, who wants to work on it? I'll work on it. Okay, so you're going to solve that bug by, and of course that's a question that's not answerable. What you're going to get is bullshit for an answer, because that person is just going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to solve that bug by Friday, I think. You think or you know? I know. But nobody knows? So if something is not really under your control, instead of committing to that something, you commit to the steps to achieve it, which are under your control. So that person can commit to working on solving the bug for at least 5 hours for the next 3 days. That's a commitment that they can achieve and not break their promise. Of course, the goal is to solve it, but they cannot promise that they will. What if you're supposed to meet with someone? You cannot control that the meeting will happen because that someone could cancel. But you can commit to scheduling the meeting. Okay? So you can commit to the steps that are under your control instead of the end result, because you can only commit to the things that are fully under your personal control. So when you do daily stand-ups and you get people to commit to things, you make sure that they only commit to things that are under their full control. And that's tough to do because you have to get used to it. You have to exercise this. That's another thing that we like to do in class, is to actually try to get people committed to real things, but to use the language. So we get members and team members talking to each other in that specific way. Those are the 10, I'm not going to say the most common because there are a few more, but those are the 10 that are, I think, the most easy to talk about without actually doing exercises. Recognizing maturity, delegation, fear of engagement. Fear of engagement actually leads to several anti-patterns. But it is that anti-pattern at all that happens that we need to avoid. We're going to have some time for a Q&A as well, but if you're interested, I'm always available at 5wise.com. That's the blog about team leaders, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. And thank you very much. Any questions that I can answer? Yes. Super reasonable. Yeah, it's a bit difficult to get at the beginning, but the pattern is that super reasonable is a way to avoid talking to someone directly by giving them very little information and assuming that that information passes much more. So sending an email sentence and assuming that that person understood exactly what you meant and not having to talk to them about it. It's by having one team meeting about a vision and not repeating team meetings and talking about the vision and making sure it's still in their minds for the rest of the project. Okay, so it's about assuming that people are reasonably remembering everything you just said and reasonably understanding everything you meant, which is, of course, horribly wrong. People don't understand things that we might say when we're facing them 1 meter away. So just imagine how much they don't understand when it's about email and they don't hear our voice inflection, they don't see our faces, they don't see how we stand. There is a lot that's going on in communication that people try to avoid. And being super reasonable is basically being unreasonable. Do I think that constant repetitive repeating of the message repeated is helping people to repeatedly remember something? Okay. People who manage people tend to under-communicate. I was just told to repeat everything you say to the microphone, that's why.
Maybe understand stuff with the minimal communication. I don't know. I just find that I am constantly telling other managers to repeat that message.
You're constantly telling other managers to repeat the message.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, but repeating the message in an effective way doesn't mean that you have to repeat it the same way every time. It sometimes means, for example, if I declare a vision of quality, it also means following up on that vision with daily not just reminders, but maybe reviews, but daily practices that are part of that. It's not just about putting up signs. It's about being with the team 50% of the time so that they keep hearing it from you in multiple ways because everything is connected. Oh no, you can't write that line. Remember, we talked about quality. That's not a quality line. And that person suddenly connects something that they didn't connect before to that vision that you had before. So it's about multiple, numerous ways of connecting the dots. And that's the only way people actually understand your message. Other questions? Yes.
You're going from assertiveness as part of solving chaos to trying to reach the next level of maturity through learning. Is there any advice how not to become so assertive that you stop them learning, you stop that progression?
So you're afraid that in chaos stage you're so assertive that you're going to continue that into the learning stage?
Or that you're going to stunt going to that stage, you're going to delay how long, because you're taking away the opportunity to learn by making decisions for the team. It seems to be heading in the opposite direction to...
Yes, it feels like they're opposite directions because they are. In chaos, the leadership type is almost the opposite of the leadership type in the learning stage. That's why I call this elastic leadership, because you stretch and bend according to the current rules of the context. And teams constantly go between different types based on their knowledge of the current technical thing, based on a million other things. So I don't think it's a problem changing the leadership type. The big problem is recognizing that you've moved from one stage to the other. And that's only practice can help, and feedback. And I've seen several managers that got stuck in the command and control phase when their team was actually in learning or even in self-organizing mode. So you're able to see teams that are already self-organizing. They know how to do things. And you see their team leader is still standing there in the stand-up going like this, like a military sergeant. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? Okay, anything stopping you? Thank you. Moving on, like a robot. Now, that's great for chaos. It might also be okay for learning, but not so great because in learning, you want things to be more open. But it's definitely not okay for a self-organizing team because they can run their own damn meetings. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Is there a chaotic self-learning team?
Chaotic learning team, so they have the structure to learn and drive themselves, but it's just constantly running for say 2 or 3 months continuously.
So I think that it cannot coexist. They might have the capacity to be self-learning and self-leading, but if they don't have time to do it and time to learn from their mistakes and actually learn because they're in chaos, so they're in chaos. So that's why chaos is dictated by the amount of time you have to learn. Because your team might have the skills necessary to go through all the stages, but based on the amount of time, you have to stop everything and actually direct the team. Because in a self-organizing team, the team learns how to accomplish things by debate, by feedback, by cycling through phases, and that takes time. In chaos, you don't have time. That's the one thing you don't have. You have a lot of problems, you have a lot of pressure. Time is not one of those. And in that moment, you need one specific person in the team that's able to just make a decision then and there without debate, without deliberation, without anything. Because this is not about getting things better for the next time. This is actually about getting out of chaos. Hey guys, we're in chaos mode. Okay, let's get rid of all the overcommitment. Let's just get things done right now. Okay? So usually you're in chaos when you don't have the capacity to self-organize because you're in a whole new structure, you're in a new product, you just got bought by a bigger company, right? Anything could happen. So your team is in chaos usually not just because of time. I've never seen teams that are self-organizing and chaotic at the same time because that can't happen physically. It's a different universe. Okay? Yes, sir. How much is too much, what, micromanagement? Are we talking about which stage now? You're either in chaos or not. It's not like half pregnant. Okay? So which one? It's learning phase. So in the learning phase, there is a lot less micromanagement going on. There should be. But there is a lot of homework. So there's a lot of catching up on, so how did that go? But that's being done usually in private meetings, one-on-ones. It's not about standing over someone's shoulder, okay? Sometimes it is if this is a really high-risk task. but I would usually not. Usually the point of having time to learn is that you also have time to make mistakes. So you let people make mistakes. It's not about everything, right? You can make the mistakes on things that are not critical to the team. For example, if you make the wrong architectural decision, it's okay to jump in and say, you didn't think about this and this, come up with a better decision. That's okay too, but it's not just about, this usually doesn't happen. I only see this happening in chaos mode. So here's an example. One of the teams that I got into that was in total chaos mode, but not just because of time, it was mostly about quality. So the team was so engaged with fixing fires and fixing bugs and fixing, basically working on schedules, they didn't have time to learn how to write quality code. So what turned up is that during chaos, the code quality became so low that the quality of the code hurt and it became more chaotic. So it was time to close that gap. So one of the things that I did is I actually assembled the whole team and I said, from this moment on, no code, even one single line of code, gets checked into source control without a review from me, which sounds horrible because now I'm the bottleneck. But this was chaos and quality was the main problem. And I sat there and for a week, I sat with another person and we switched people all the time and we reviewed the code together that got checked in, even though we were in chaos mode, because there was no other choice. That was my decision at that point. And people got annoyed. They didn't know what's going to happen. I didn't know what's going to happen. It just felt right. After a week, I switched, and that person did the review, and I just sat next to them, making sure that they review code well. And the code quality, of course, went up, but also people learned how to review each other's code. So it was no longer a bottleneck after 2 weeks, because we had at least 2 people that taught other people, and all the rules were being written. So it was almost like forcing the team to learn quality when you don't have time to learn, because it was necessary at that time. And quality went up, and as quality went up, problems went down because there were less fires. Okay, because refactoring the code made such a big difference. And to this day, that team actually has that practice because they like it, although they're no longer in chaos mode. Okay? And that team keeps switching between learning and self-leading. So hopefully that answered the question, which I don't remember by now. Yes? Sometimes you have to challenge people out of their comfort zone. What if they don't want to do it? It's a good question. Well, it depends on which stage you are. Because sometimes people have to get out of their comfort zone even in the chaotic stage. For example, that code review thing got people out of their comfort zone because they were doing something. But there wasn't even a question that we're going to do that. There wasn't any time to deliberate. It was just a decision. So that was being very assertive. But I usually tell people that I only work with people in teams who want to get better. And I don't want to work with people who don't want to get better. Now, it's your choice what to get better at. But you have to get better at something. Okay, so it's not acceptable that you don't want to step out of your comfort zone. The fact that you don't want to do it is usually a good indication that you should do it, in fact. Okay? And I explained to them that the fact that they don't want to do it is the indication. Just like, my computer is slow. What are you going to do about it? Well, I could talk to that guy from IT who hates me. Okay, so what are you going to do? I will talk to that guy who hates me. By when? I'll talk to the guy who hates me by Wednesday, etc. So now he has to face that guy and actually talk to him, but he has your backing. So this is also about being assertive. You don't have to shout at anyone, but you can definitely set a line that says, in this team, this is how we're going to do things. And that's the only way. Sorry. And that's a tough thing to do. Writing a line in the sand is a very tough thing to do for a team leader. So what if they don't want to? No such thing. I mean, even if they don't want to, they still have to do it because you're their team leader. This is where authority starts to matter again. This is why I think that Scrum Masters usually make lousy leaders, because they don't have authority. So they cannot affect really lousy decisions by the team. And since most teams are in chaos, most teams need leadership that's actually stronger than just a Scrum Master. They need someone that's not only a Scrum Master, but someone that can say, what you're doing right now is horrible, stop what you're doing right now, do this, and then we'll talk in 2 weeks. Someone needs to do that. And that's why a lot of Scrum projects fail, is because the Scrum Master doesn't really have a lot of power. And I've heard, people from ThoughtWorks and other places complain about how in that project, or 50% of the project, people don't listen to what they have to say, so they just fail, and they endlessly talk, and of course they have to do it in a coaching sort of way, right? Are you sure you don't want to use source control? I don't know. What is that about? Use source control, right? There's some things are beyond questions. Some things are beyond coaching. They're about basic procedures that have to be done. Start with that and then learn why, right? It's just like computer science, etc. So I guess the answer is I would not let a person go by without learning something. Okay? I can give them choices though. Yeah. How do I move from one to the other? What steps do I take? How do I move from chaos to managed learning? Well, we cover it at length, but basically some of the things are about managing your current commitments. One of the reasons you're in chaos is because you are overcommitted. So you have to remove some of the commitments to actually be more realistic. One of the ways to do it is to visualize the tasks, so that you have a way to actually negotiate about the commitments with management. Without a task board, this is much harder to do. It doesn't have to be a Kanban board. It can just be a regular, like, to-do, in progress, done. That's the beginning of something, a conversation. The next thing you have to do is to remove commitments for the next month, so that you have a month to just finish what you have right now and then start, reboot the team. I call it team rebooting because that's what you really do. You start from scratch and say, what we're doing now doesn't work, so we have a month to close whatever we have. We have to close these fires, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to take new commitments, and I'm going to actually put my ass on the line and talk to management and explain to them that we're going to actually remove these commitments so that we have a month to reboot the team, because the current way of work is unacceptable. And that's part of the risk that you have to take as a team leader. So a lot of it is actually, again, drawing a line in the sand and saying, the way the team is run right now is problematic. To give you better service as a development team, we're going to cut what we have right now. We're going to recommit to some of the things. We'll talk in 3 weeks. We'll talk in a month, etc. So that's part of the things you do. And you have to do it. And people will get annoyed. And you might get a lot of flack for doing it. But the thing is that the only difference from what you did yesterday is that you're just surfacing the problems. Someone had to resurface them. Remember, management done right is a tough job. That's why you get paid more. Now, go on and do the tough things. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's why it's scary. Okay? Yes? How do you move from being a team member to a team leader in the same team? Well, first of all, you need to understand that it's going to be quite a painful process. Not because it has to be bad, but because leadership, especially with people you already know, can sometimes feel very lonely. Because the first time you ask someone to do something or you challenge someone to do something, you've, at that moment, drawn a line that says, things are going to be different from now on. And it's very scary to do, but you have to do it. Of course, you have to do a team meeting that says, from now on, things are going to be different. And from that meeting on, you're going to have to actually gather courage and actually do those things and challenge people as if you were never a team member. That's it. And it's going to feel as lonely as hell in the beginning, because you're going to feel like you're going to lose your friends, and you're not. But they're definitely going to treat you differently from that moment on. And that's something you have to accept, is that you cannot have the same relationship with the people that you used to work with as a team member than you do as a team leader. Because things are going to be different, especially if you do your job right. Now, a lot of leaders don't want to accept that, so they don't do their job. So they keep all the friends, but they also don't do any of the tough tasks, which makes them less effective as team leaders. I would say almost not effective. So I had one of my worst team leaders was one of my best friends. And that goes hand in hand. Because that person who we went to barbecues with and all that stuff was that person who was afraid to challenge us and to tell us when things were wrong and to challenge us. So as a result, I actually respected him less as a team leader because he didn't do his job. And we all know when we could have done better. We all know when our team leader missed or jumps over something that we know we could have done better. And we respect them less for it. I don't know if it's everyone, but I definitely feel that way, and I think a lot of people do. Hopefully that answers. Yes? So you're not sure about the differences between personal motivation and social motivation? I'll give you an example that's actually described in the book Influencer, and that was that there was a hideous plague of wife beating in Africa, in a lot of villages, very, very common. And one of the reasons that they assessed it happens is because no one does anything, because the neighbors accept it. That's the social. So one of the ways the researchers did, one of the things the researchers did to start changing it was by teaching practices to the neighbors. Because everyone heard when the wife got beat. They heard screams. So what they taught them is to go out of their house, which was right near the house of the hitting husband, and take pots and pans and hit them with the forks and just make noise. And just by that, letting the beater know that they know. Social peer pressure. If you think peer pressure, you understand social motivation. Okay? And that stopped almost all of those cases. Now, how to get those people to do that behavior is another 6-force checklist, right? How do you get people to do it? Because no one else did it, so there was peer pressure not to do it, etc. So you get someone that they respect, like a leader of the clan, etc., to do it. And when they do it, then everyone joins them. Things like that. So usually you get a chain of these forces checklists to say, okay, so to get that behavior, we need that person to do this behavior. So how do we get that person to do this behavior? Okay, to get that person, we do another checklist, etc. Okay? Personal motivation is personal. It's in your head. It's all about what you understand. It's not about, it could be social, but it's just about perception of social. It's what people program themselves to think. Sometimes it's just fear. Sometimes it's previous experience. A person doesn't want to do TDD because they did TDD in a previous project and it failed. So they don't want to even try it. Personal. Okay? Other questions? Yes. How do you do it if part of your team is India? So I get a lot of questions about distributed teams. Well, let's start with the fact that in a distributed team, you're already screwed. There is no good solution to a distributed team. I would argue that if you're the team leader and you actually have control of your team, is that you make your team non-distributed. That might be you getting out of your comfort zone. Is actually getting management, forget management, you asserting your ability to change the team structure and making sure that the team is only local as much as possible. So I would say change reality instead of face it. Because distributed teams, Skype and all that stuff, and telepresence, and Scott Hanselman working in Seattle from Wisconsin, whatever, that's like, like lipstick on a pig. It's still just horrible. And I know because I work on a distributed team right now. So I can see all the effects of working from home. And even on the best team, it would still be just a hint of a whiff of understanding of what it's like to be in that room with the other people. It's horribly not the same. So I don't have a good solution for that, except don't do it. And sometimes don't do it is the solution. But people are afraid to say that. Really? And tell them not distributed? But they will tell me that's not possible. Okay. That's why you get paid, is to make tough decisions if you can, or drive tough decisions, right? Because of your knowledge, because of your ability to say that this will work better for the company. So try to assert yourself on that. Okay? Yeah.
How big can a team be? A team with one team leader.
How big is a good team?
Yeah.
Because a team can be 100 people. But a good team, I don't think it's more than 8. I think 8 is already a problem. I would say that 6 is okay, 4 is great. Someone said a pizza size. Okay? So if your team takes more than 2 pizzas, you have a problem. Of course, if I'm on the team, we already have a problem. Yeah, but basically it's about communication. The bigger your team, the more you spend on communication. Now, I would say in distributed team, each person in distributed team is worth 2 people of the communication lost. So smaller teams are better, and if you manage a team of 12 people, I think it's your duty to split up that team into 2 teams.
With 2 team leaders.
At least, if not 3. 12 is a good 3-4 teams. Other questions? Yes. The 2 pizza? Yeah, I think maybe you're right.
Limit the opportunities for pair programming.
So does a team of 3 people, can they do pair programming? Of course. So you have 2 people doing pair programming and the other going like this. No, I'm just kidding. But usually what teams do is that if the team has an odd number of people, usually you get one person to do maintenance tasks on a repeated cycle, and the rest do pair programming. And sometimes you don't do pair programming. I know that it's difficult to say, but some tasks don't require pair programming, like documentation. Okay? Sometimes documentation requires pair programming so that you don't get to sleep. But other than that, it's quite all right. If you have a team of 4 people, I don't see the problem. You can still do pair programming. Sorry, breaks my teeth to say that. So I've never seen a problem with pair programming, even in teams of 2. Teams of 1, the team lead pairs with the person. So that's a team of 2 together. So teams of 2 are actually 3 with the team leader. Okay? Other questions? Yes. How do you protect the team from being stolen? At which stage? The learning stage. In the learning stage, you teach people to not get stolen. So, as an example, in chaos, you have to protect the team. You are the only source of influence on the team, right? You have to say, this is my team. No one takes anyone away from me. If you do, I quit. Yes, you have to be pretty assertive. Because if you don't take control of your team, someone else will. And that's very, very true. In the learning stage, it's usually your learning that's going to take place as a team leader. Okay, because it's you that has to work with the higher-ups. You can't really tell a team not to get stolen because it's not their authority. Okay? It's only the team leader's problem of facing that because the team doesn't have authority to say on which project they work on unless you like work at Google or something. Okay? So there is no good solution except that you find a good way to get out of your comfort zone and make sure that people don't steal your team members. Maybe the other way to do it is to say, maybe I need to learn how to adapt when I have team members stolen so that I'm still running a good team. And so you learn either this or that, but you have to learn something, right? You throw a lizard in the desert, it has to learn something, or it dies. So good luck. But I say I've never had that problem really, and I don't think that I'm personally a good politician. I think that if I had that problem, I would be way out of my comfort zone, and it would take me a few months to get over that, to find ways to make sure it doesn't happen to my team. But it's just a learning opportunity. So you should be glad that it happens. Okay? Because when I think of team leadership, I think of human experiments. You are experimenting with humans as a team leader. People pay you to experiment with people. And if you think about it as experiments, it can be temporary. Okay, what happens if we work this way for a month? What happens if we do this? Okay, I get people stolen for this department, this department. What happens if I do this? Okay, I got fired. Interesting. Well, usually you don't get to that kind of. You get a lot of warnings before you get fired, especially if you're good. But I just treat it as a learning experience. Okay. Yeah. Which stage is this? So in the chaos stage, you work on multiple different projects. So you have a problem of context switching. So that's the stage where you remove commitments until you can get the team to some kind of reasonable state of work. So you actually have to go and say, we cannot do this anymore, we cannot do this, we are already overbooked. So you get a person to do no more than 2 things at the same time, hopefully from the same project. And you're going to get a lot of flack for it, but you're going to have to face it because that's your job. You're going to have to take a stand. Did that answer the question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, I have a lot of suggestions on how to deal with a rotten apple on the team. So my course happens on November. I'm just kidding. One way to do it is to actually look at the 6 forces of influence. Because when you say that someone is a rotten apple, you immediately do a presuppositions that assumes that he's doing things on purpose, that he doesn't have a larger context. Because everyone who does something is doing it for something that feels reasonable to them. Now, if you go through and you say, why is that person so negative on my team? And you go through the 6 forces, sometimes you realize that there is a lot of good reasons why he's doing it that you weren't paying attention to. And that the problem might not even be with that person. It could be with the system. Sometimes, and that happened a couple of times, even for me, you realize that the problem is not the person, it's you. You're the only one who has a problem with that person on the team, and everyone else on the team just happily accepts it. And for example, a person that's very argumentative, is that a good or a bad thing? It's usually a good thing. You want multiple opinions in your team. But a lot of team leaders don't like argumentative people because they want more control. They don't want to be shamed in public. And it's not shame. It's your personal view of how you're perceived. Okay, so a lot of times you're going to try to solve a problem that doesn't exist because it's only a problem for you. But that's, I think, that stage of understanding that you're looking for a problem and you're actually the problem, is I think it takes a lot of exercises to do it. And you're going to solve a lot of the wrong problems along the way until you find that. So usually rotten apples are not rotten apples. Usually they're just people with specific ways of thinking that are very different from the team. And it's your job not to fire them, but to keep them and to build them into the team that you think they could be. So there's a sentence that goes, you can't fire everyone. And that's very true. And if you always look at the team and you say, if only my team were different, if only I had another person on the team that does this, then you will never get the team that you want. True teams are grown. They're not hired. And that's the one thing that you need to learn as a team leader, is that it's the easiest thing to get rid of someone on your team. It's the hardest thing to turn them into the team member that you think they could be, to grow them into that team member. Okay? Yes? You're still the leader. You just don't have to tell anyone what to do. You just give them constraints. No, it doesn't become easier. Okay, so let me just repeat for the viewers. You are in the self-leading stage. What do you do as a team leader? As a team leader, you kind of step back and you influence the team in the directions that you want by just setting the context in which the team works. Inputting new people into the team, giving them different goals, different schedules, different locations of work. That's the true human experiment. Say, I have this bunch of mice. What if I put them near the QA, like right in the middle, in the center of the QA? What happens then? Okay? Or I have this great team. They're self-leading, but they keep making the wrong architectural choices. I don't want to tell them what to do. How can I influence them to reconsider things? You can start asking questions. And a good book that I recommend here is, and it's not written here, it's by Mike Cohn, called Succeeding with Agile. And it has a chapter about constraints that you have as a team lead. And that perfectly fits the vision that self-leading teams have. It's called Leading Self-Leading Teams. And that's about how to lead without telling people what to do. It's by setting goals and constraints and changing the interactions between people and forcing them to think about things without actually telling them that they're wrong. Because they're not wrong. They're just achieving that result that you thought is not necessarily okay. Sometimes you're actually wrong. So the interactions are just done on a meta level instead of a personal level. But you still do a lot, because you set the goals for the team so that they actually do the right thing. Okay? It's still your job to translate things. They know how to translate themselves, but it's your job to make sure that everyone is on the same track, that the vision that you have is the vision that they have. Okay? Yeah. Yes, it's the same thing. Self-leading and self-organizing. I keep switching between because I'm still not sure what to call it. My point was to explain that a lot of times Scrum doesn't fit the team because it's in chaos. And Scrum may fit some teams in learning, but it definitely fits most teams that are in self-organizing. Unfortunately, most teams are not self-organizing. That's why Scrum still doesn't work for most teams. So learning Scrum as in the learning phase is good, but only have a Scrum Master in the learning phase is not good. Because someone still needs to be in authority in the learning phase. Someone still needs to direct people into learning opportunities. Someone still has to coach them into learning things, because they wouldn't get there on their own. They still don't have the skills to solve their own problems. So someone still has to pull the wagon, sometimes with the force of authority, with one-on-ones and giving homework and actually challenging people to do something that a Scrum Master just cannot achieve. That's what the team leader does. And the team leader is there to get those people from here to there. The Scrum Master is kind of a weak point because they're in charge of a process, they're not in charge of people. So it's not even their job to grow people. Okay? So you will never get to the self-organizing stage if you're just doing Scrum and you expect it to help you. Scrum is just good to get something manageable going. But it's not good for a learning team. It's supposed to help when you have those iterations where you learn at the end of every iteration. But it's more of a team learning instead of a personal growth. Is it easier to apply Kanban? Kanban and Scrum have nothing to do with this. Kanban and Scrum are just methods of managing information and task flow. Kanban is great for getting out of chaos. Okay? Because it visualizes the information, it gives you constraints, and it gets you out and gives you some time to learn, gets you out of chaos. But it's not a growth technique. Kanban is good as an optimization technique. But to get Kanban, you need to grow, okay, to really get it. So usually, you don't need Kanban, you just need a task board with 3 columns. And in the learning stage, you turn it into a Kanban board. But at the beginning, you don't need a full Kanban board. You just need a strong leader and a visualization of the tasks and someone who's able to put their ass on the line and say, we cannot commit to all this because someone needs to do it. Someone needs to save the ship. Okay? And in Kanban, there is no role of someone who saves the ship. There's just Kanban. Okay? So a Porsche cannot save you as much as Kanban. It's just a Porsche. Okay? Someone has to drive it. Yes, a Scrum Master makes sense in a self-leading phase. Actually, I would say that in the self-leading phase, everyone can be a Scrum Master as well. Okay, it's just someone who reminds people. Yeah, so a Scrum Master is mostly about the process. So it's just, hey, let's not forget to do the daily iteration thing and whatever. And you can actually switch it on a daily basis. And I don't remember who wrote this. One of the original premises of Scrum is that a Scrum Master is a role that keeps switching. That's not true in traditional Scrum today, which is wrong. But in true Scrum, a self-leading team can actually self-lead. So anyone can be the Scrum Master because everyone knows everything. Everyone knows how to solve their own problems. Everyone knows how to tackle everything. So Scrum fits best in a self-organizing team. Okay? Yes? Do I make a distinction between a manager and a leader? Well, there is a distinction because the manager is usually the person who's in charge of either payroll, hiring, firing, etc. And the leader is usually the person with the vision. And a lot of times it's the same person. And I would rather it be the same person because you get the authority to do the things that you believe in. Okay, I think that's the most powerful combination. For example, I think the least powerful combination is a non-technical manager over technical people because you get more chances of placating. Someone says, I just can't do it this way, and you don't have the ability to know if that person is just bullshitting you. So you just say, okay. Or you have to consult with someone to know if they're bullshitting you. Okay? So if you have less negotiation power, and in chaos, you can't afford that. In learning stage, what can you teach that person technically? Nothing. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't good leaders for technical people, but I think that they can be even better if they're technical themselves. Okay? Yes? You're switching to the role of a team leader? So what's the question? I don't understand. How do you go from a senior dev, assuming that someone already gave you the job? How do you go from a senior dev to a leader? What changes? All the things, all the realizations of the things that you need to learn here. That's everything. Everything changes. Your world changes. Everything you know and love has gone away. Your world is destroyed and rebuilt, and you are now a team leader. If you don't know it, it's just a matter of time until you realize it. I think it's true, and I think it's something that it's a sad realization. That's why it feels so lonely sometimes, is because everything changes. The things that you know and love are no longer true. Because you can't just go on and say, screw those managers. You can't. You are those managers. Screw you, basically, right? You cannot be a part of that team as a team member anymore, and that's sad. That's life, right? You have to give something in return to get something, in that case. So, other than just, get this stuff, I don't have any other advice. Hopefully that's enough to begin with. But if not, I would love to see you in my course. I think it's important. That's why I built it, because there isn't such a course for people who are moving from this role to the other. There is nothing to prepare you for that. I think that's really missing. There are a lot of management books, but as software people, no one looks at them because they think it doesn't apply to them. Okay? That's why I'm writing a book for software people. That's why I'm doing this course, because I think this is sorely missing. Okay? Yeah.
Project managers.
Hold on. He was before you. Yeah. You've been promoted to team leader. What do you do? What's the first thing you do? What do you mean? What do you do the next day? Sure. Okay. So you get into the roles of a very successful team leader who you have no contact with. Why? Is he dead? Can you call him up and get some kind of, what do you call it? Sorry? Thank you. Can you get that guy for a week to hang out with you while you work with the new team? Can you call him and say, so can you give me the scoop on these people, what do you see, what do you know? You have to get the what's going on from someone. So that's the first thing you probably do, is to understand where you are. And I have a whole section of this that I teach, is where do you start on a new team? And the first thing is that you want to understand what stage you're in. Maybe you think they were a great team, but you realize you're in chaos. So you start visualizing the tasks. How many tasks are we doing right now? And then you do other things, like, for example, you assemble all the team in the room. Of course, you introduce yourself, and you say, okay, so if we are 6 months from now, and it's the end of the project, and the project failed, why did it fail? And you start getting these interesting answers. It failed because right now we have this, and that's never going to work. It failed because no one talks to us, and it failed because we have all this stuff to do, and only 2 days to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So you understand where you are, understand the context. Based on that, you start to understand what type of leadership is needed. Maybe you're going to realize everyone is already doing their work, everything is already flowing. If this is a self-organizing team, the fact that the team leader has died shouldn't matter too much. It shouldn't, because they should be able to continue on their own. In fact, in my teams, I'm able to travel for a week, come back, and everything still works. They don't need me to solve their problems. That's part of the reason. You're not the bottleneck anymore. So usually teams are not there. Usually they're mostly in chaos, sometimes in learning, but you have to understand where you are. So you measure how much time you have. You start putting up balloons and say, let's try and do a half day of just learning this. And then you're going to get a lot of reactions like, oh, we can't. We can't because we have this and this and this. And okay, so we don't have any learning time. Interesting. So now you know. So understanding the context is the first thing I would do. Okay? Other questions? Yeah.
How should you and your team work with project managers?
How should we work with project managers? Very carefully. Don't encourage them. That's such a broad question, I don't even know how to answer that.
I mean, do you have a sense in which the way in which a package of work, which you, I mean, I guess the team leader has communicated to him from the project manager the nature of the work that has to be done. The business analyst does his stuff, and then in the teams you've worked on that work best, how involved is the project manager with you and your team?
Usually the project manager is directly linked to the team leader in the teams I work with. They are freely able to hang out with the team in a team that's learning and self-organizing. They cannot do it in chaos. So, because a team that's learning should be able to learn how to handle a project manager that comes in with unreasonable demands. Oh, there you go, just put it on the wall. Where do you want it? Oh, you want it before this task? Is it more important? Not more important? Okay, done. Right? Teams need to learn how to do this. You cannot protect them. But usually it's more of a very simple relationship of sometimes visualizing Gantt charts up and visualizing Kanban boards down. That's basically it. It's very simple. When the team is manageable and everything is predictable, a Gantt chart is just a view of the current situation. Project managers just needs to know some time zones. Are we there yet? Are we going to be there? Is it going to fail? No big deal, really. Yes? Hold on, what time is it? 20 past 8. We have 10 minutes left. Yeah. Day-to-day behaviors as a team lead? It depends on the team stage. What stage of the team are you talking about? The learning stage? Mostly it's about doing all those agile things. The XP stuff. Getting the team to do continuous, getting all the practices right. Getting the team to get actual work done is usually doing the XP related stuff. Learning TDD, you have to have time to learn TDD, right? You cannot learn TDD in chaos. We all agree on that, right? That's why a lot of teams never learn TDD, because they don't have time to do it. So of course they learn miserably. So that's the stage where they learn TDD and continuous integration and acceptance testing and all that stuff. So a team leader will spend most of their time mentoring and teaching people, giving them background checks on specific items that they need to learn, making sure they learn it, and just setting them free. And like, for example, to learn something each week, they will set a practice. Each week, someone talks about a new subject that they have to learn and teaches everyone about it. So it's a lot of challenging stuff, and it's like a startup, because every week you learn something new. Because in the learning phase, you are learning. You're doing a lot of work, but you're also learning how to do the work better, because you have the time to do it. So it's mostly about continuously looking for loopholes where things could be better, challenging the team to better them, and making sure this is all done in a reliable manner. Okay, so you're more of a coach. You just make sure that the things that are the most risky and are being done wrong, you have to still fix. Okay, so you can let your child run around the house, but if they get their hand really close to the oven, you're there to stop them. Okay? Yeah. I'll get back to that after his question. How much time do you want to spend learning? It changes based on the team. It changes based on the projects. How much time do you spend learning is so much open to interpretation. As long as you learn something every time, every week, then you're okay. Some projects are stressed, or you have an hour a day or a half hour a day. Some projects are in between projects, so you have a month off where you can do training and getting everyone involved, or getting everyone out and trying to do seminars. So it really changes. You do what you can, as long as you do something. Yeah. So what do you do in the self-learning phase? In the self-leading phase, you mean? You mentor them. You mentor them. You don't tell them what to do. You just basically make sure that they're in the right direction, on the right vision, and that they're challenged by constant constraints. They know how to learn, they know how to solve problems. Your challenge is to make sure that they are always challenged and that they're working on the right vision, towards the right things, in the right way. Other questions? What, that's it? Those are all the questions you had? Only 74 questions? Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you at some point. Cheers.